Okay, the second technique that we've been using a lot in post-event reconnaissance, because it's really light, it's like the size of your backpack in terms of equipment, is the use of surface wave dispersion measurement to calculate the spectral characteristics of surface waves. We don't really care so much about the surface waves. Really what we're interested in is a shear wave velocity profile to either assess site amplification, stiffness or modulus characteristics of the ground, or liquefaction characteristics of the ground. So we have these tools that we place on the surface, but they allow us to invert a shear wave velocity indirectly from the data set. So we're not really out to capture surface waves in and of themselves. We're interested in capturing surface waves to learn something about the shear wave velocity or stiffness of the soil. So you've seen a bunch of pictures in the morning of this operation where we have these large electromechanical shakers that we put on the ground and seismometers. And the procedures that we use in spectral analysis of surface waves is we first capture a field dispersion curve, and then we compute the theoretical shear wave velocity profile that matches the dispersive characteristics that we observe from the empirical data in the field. So that's the essence of the inversion, from which we're going to typically answer two problems. What kind of site classification are we going to give it in terms of site amplification? This would be the top right here for Kobe City in Japan, or assessing liquefaction characteristics of the ground. When we're not operating in a reconnaissance, we can bring a lot of weight into the ground, and we can take a lot of time to set up. When we're in a reconnaissance mode, we tend not to do this kind of operation. So instead, what we do for reconnaissance mode is we bring very small, lightweight seismometers, smaller than this, that are still 1 hertz, and put them on the ground. And then instead of bringing shakers, we would use a hammer source. Hammer sources are not great because they pass all the data through to do the Fourier transform. When we use the shakers, we do a low-pass, high-pass gate with a notch filter, and we filter out all the cultural noise and only focus in on the wave frequency that we want to analyze and process them in a stepwise fashion. So there's a real difference in the data quality from a reconnaissance-based surface wave field effort and what we would do if we had all the time and luxury to bring out the big guns out into the field. Nevertheless, it's useful to get profiles in the upper tens of meters. The third technique, and this is something that you just got to be younger than me to do, is this dynamic CPT testing. So here's Scott Olson, who must weightlift every day to just train for this. And then he has grad students that he has available to him to do these measurements. So Scott will set up on a site, and he'll have his, he'll auger down a hole, and then he'll stick in his dynamic, basically as a sampler, and then they have this drop weight that they're dropping in and whacking into the ground. And in his sampler, he puts on a cone head, so it's basically a dynamic CPT. And he can generate these very detailed profiles purely through mechanical, manual work. So here's an example of different sites where we have this data capture. That's it for me. You're up.